E.ON is sponsoring MotoFest, which is a celebration of all things motoring. We're particularly interested in this from a point of view of working with the city to help decarbonise the city as a whole, and specifically looking at the electrification of vehicles. I'm here as part of a round table to talk about not just the sort of elite end of sport, but how we bring electrification and a sustainable transport model to the population at large. And we're going to have a roundtable conversation around that. I'm joined by a number of guests and colleagues who are representing various different sectors who will be required to collaborate to make such a future a success for us. So we're going to compete for your attention alongside this amazing piece of technology for about the next 45-60 minutes or so. I'm sure you're going to find it interesting and insightful. I think a couple of things I'd just like to say up front before we get into the questions and the discussion. Firstly, it's really, really impressive to see the commitment that Coventry as a city has to drive sustainability and decarbonisation at city level. And I think what's equally as impressive is the recognition that the city is giving to the fact that for this to be successful, it's going to require collaboration across a range of sectors. And that collaboration is going to require private industry, entrepreneurs, council. It's going to require academia, universities, and everyone to create a joined up holistic solution to this that fully engages the members of the public and provides sustainable jobs for everyone who's involved in it in the local area and creates that sustainable local economy that I know we all value so highly. So I'm really pleased to see that happening in Coventry. E.ON is really proud to be given the opportunity to sponsor the event over the course of the next couple of days. We're also really proud to be part of some of the other wider things that the Cllr has been putting in place, such as the Coventry Climate Change Board, and really being an agent for driving change. So a little bit about E.ON first. We do work with a number of cities across Europe. We've got a real focus on not only driving decarbonisation at city level, but also right the way through to individual businesses and residential homes, deploying a range of technologies from things such as solar PV, right the way through to individual EV charge points into a customer's residential home. We try and do this at scale. We are pretty used to working across multiple different customers and customer types and engaging the public in the change that's required. And you can see that no more strongly, I think, than in some of the technologies we roll out that are perhaps quite well known to people, such as smart meters, where we still roll those out at over 10,000 a week and really enable customers to engage in their energy consumption and help everyone play their own personal role in decarbonisation. So why is Coventry so important to E.ON? Well, very, very simply, it's our home. It's our headquarters for the UK, just on the back of the Warwick manufacturing site and Warwick University. We're a very, very large local employer and also have tens of thousands of customers who we supply with renewable energy in the city of Coventry and the surrounding areas. So Coventry really is at the centre of our aspirations in the UK. So I know I'm not alone in that. I think what you're going to find does unite everyone on this panel now is probably a passion for a couple of things. One, decarbonisation, particularly in the EV sector, but secondly, a real strong commitment to the city of Coventry. And I'm going to start by asking Jim perhaps to introduce yourself and say why you're so passionate about this topic, Jim, and then we'll move on down the line.
Thank you, Chris. By the way, what Chris hasn't said is he's a representative of E.ON. If you stay here for the whole hour, if you collar him at the end of the meeting, I'm sure if you're an E.ON customer, he'll get you on the lowest possible tariff before you go today. Because I've got a smart meter, and I must admit I can't always understand what it's telling me, but so I just switch things off. But I'm Councillor Jim O'Boyle from Coventry City Council. I'm the Cabinet Member for Jobs, Regeneration and Climate Change. Just a little bit about some projects that we're involved in. Climate change is important to everybody, not just in this city, in this country, in the world. And I was just talking to Margot James, just at lunchtime actually, and you can really see the signs of climate change happening in our city, in your own gardens really right now, and there's no doubt it is happening. So what are we doing to try and help make a difference locally? And one of the things that I'll just run through a few things, but you've got to, in my view, because my background is I worked in the car industry for 19 years. I worked for Peugeot and up at the Wrighton plant, for those locally in Coventry who will know it, until it finally closed in 2006-07. I'm not going into the whole history of that, but it gave me an opportunity to buy a house, have a car, low emission car, but a car nonetheless. It allowed me to make choices because it was a decent job with decent pay, and it also told me a bit about the history of Coventry. Coventry was the birthplace of the UK automotive industry. Our economy was massively reliant on it. It's not as reliant on it as it once was, but it's still very important in terms of our economic overall value. And I believe if you're going to ask people and the public to engage in different behavioural change, you need to take them with you as well. So there's that carrot and stick approach, if you like, and that's what always drives what I do. And one of the things we often talk about, and you'll probably hear it a lot today, certainly heard it earlier on already, the green industrial revolution. If we're going to be a thriving economy and we're going to drive down our carbon emissions, we've got to invest heavily in the industries that are going to drive the economic fortunes of a place like Coventry in the future. And that means gigafactories, that means dealing with helping to support retrofitting of both residential properties, but also in terms of the workplace. And these are massive challenges as a country that at the moment we haven't really sorted out or set out how we are going to do that in a proper, organised and coherent way. A couple of points about the gigafactory. For those who don't know, Coventry identified Coventry Airport as potential gigafactory. That has always been the case for a gigafactory, not for a particular supplier, a particular company. It's always about having the opportunity for this region to build its share of batteries to help support a growing manufacturing base for electric automotive vehicles in this country, because we keep being told, and JLR are here today and they'll speak for themselves, the point is the manufacturers will go where the batteries are, and that is an absolute fact as I understand it, and that is why it's important that if you build the batteries here, you can then support both the current manufacturers, but then the manufacturers of the future as they transition to electrification. So the view I always had was, as part of the overall plan, to have not just one gigafactory in this country, but to have 7 or 8 to support the automotive sector was important, but also to support the growing use of batteries in different sectors as it goes forward, whether in residential, commercial or factory settings. James mentioned CVLR. If you get the opportunity, go and have a look at this, because it's there today. It's not just about a tram. It's not just about the fact that it's used automotive lightweighting, so it's a unique vehicle. It's also got a unique track form that will save not millions of pounds when you put these into the ground and into cities. It will save hundreds of millions of pounds in a city like Coventry alone, never mind around the country, because of the unique track system that we've developed. And as a council, we own the intellectual property of that, and we've got a product that we can sell. And I'm not going into how it works, but suffice it to say, we know it will work, and we know we can do that, and we need support from government to make it happen, because ultimately putting these systems into cities is not just as simple as someone saying, well, I'm going to put that in a road and that's just done. It doesn't quite work like that, but it's an incredible innovation, completely autonomous, driven by electrification. Now electrification, of course, Coventry is going to be the only city in the country by 2025 with an all-electric bus fleet. Again, that was our commitment to wanting to drive down carbon emissions in the transport sector, which is still, it's still been too high over a number of decades. It's been stubbornly high, and we know that with these interventions we can make a huge difference quite quickly in terms of bringing those emission levels down, which is why Coventry has got the most electric vehicle charge points anywhere in the country outside of London, because we're gearing up to make sure that we're ready in infrastructure terms when the electrification revolution really kicks in, when suddenly there'll be a balance where, I don't know what the percentage of vehicles on the road at the moment are electric, but you can bet your life as 2030 gets closer, that graph will get steeper, and if you haven't invested in the infrastructure, that graph will just tail off, and you'll have trouble with the industry as a whole. And it was also mentioned as well, urban airport, which was just across the road here last year, basically demonstrating how drone technology can take vehicles off the road. It's as simple as that. And actually this technology exists now. Again, it's about bringing it in to the real life places we're talking about. So there's lots of interesting, exciting things happening in Coventry. Last thing I'll say, because Chris wants to move on, I'll say this: we're about to put in a planning application to put a big solar farm in Coventry, so that we've got a generation of electric that's completely carbon free. So we're really putting our money where our mouth is.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Boyle, for the context and the introduction. Perfect lead into the importance of technology in transportation. And Dan, maybe I ask you just to quickly introduce yourself and say a little bit about who you are.
Yes, thanks guys. I wish I could say I was doing quite as much. But I'm Dan Bailey. I'm co-founder of the Veloce Group and CEO of Veloce Racing. We're a business that's very much committed to the future of racing specifically, but that naturally transcends into the automotive industry. Built primarily, the business was built in esports and gaming. We have a vast audience of 750 million views a month from 37 million subscribers of primarily 16 to 24-year-olds consuming racing, but in the digital world. And we saw nothing in the real world of racing that really we thought was applicable or relevant to our audience, which was the next generation who are worried about climate change, the future of the automotive industry, and a lot more conscious consumer. And we came across a series called Extreme E, all electric racing in the world's most extreme locations, bringing awareness to climate change, men and women racing together to try and push more gender equality. And as a new media and sports rights holder, it felt a very relevant place for Veloce to go. As a series that is really pushing the boundary on the future of the automotive industry, battery technology, driving 2-ton SUVs, you can have a look at it over there. In Greenland, in Senegal, we just raced, our last race in Scotland was in an abandoned coal mine which is being converted into a hydroelectric plant. Always with an environmentally relevant message against the backdrop of very, very future-facing automotive technology. So as a person who loves racing, come from a racing family, the future of the racing industry is fundamental to where I want to be and what I want to strive to try and improve.
Thank you, Dan. Mark, I believe you might be responsible for this.
Yeah, I am indeed, yeah. So I'm Mark Truman, I'm the CEO and founder of ARC. We're a technology-based business and the producer of these wonderful motorcycles, the Vector. They're an all-electric motorcycle, very much performance-based, each one bespoke to their customer. So quite a high-end recreational product. This isn't about sort of A to B mobility, but more sort of A to C because you want to. ARC is very much focused on challenging perceptions and also making sure that we understand exactly what the real situation is. I think it's very easy for people to jump onto bandwagons because they hear snippets of information, and those bits of information aren't always correct. So we try and be as technology agnostic as we can be, and want to find the perfect solution, if possible, with the best tools and technology that we have around us. I read a great report a few weeks ago. It was actually based on fruit and veg, and it was sort of It took everything into account in terms of the amount of carbon that was created for a particular fruit and veg in a particular country to get it to here in the UK. And it turned out that bananas from Spain created less carbon in its production and its transportation than broccoli from England. So, you know, it's about, for me, trying to understand what the real truth is, sort of cradle to grave, and, you know, make sure that, you know, as a business and as a person, we try and follow that. So, you know, not just sustainability, but, you know, a lot of ecological issues are things that are very important to me and my family. We live on a self-sustaining small holding in West Wales, and yeah, unfortunately I have to commute to Coventry every week to do my work because that's where all the best automotive people are. So here I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Matt?
Yeah, so I'm Matt Clayton. I'm Strategic Lead for Looked After Children. I'm part of the Children's Services Leadership team here in the City Council, and I lead on trying to make Coventry a child-friendly city. So it's great to be part of this today. I think there's a couple of things that just really speak through about why this is so important. I think from the beginning of MotoFest, and sort of see MotoFest from the beginning, bringing sport, bringing racing, bringing cars into the city centre and making people proud to be from Coventry is such a massive thing. And for so many of our children and young people, especially those from more deprived communities, actually the chance to see things in the city centre, to feel excited by their city, to be excited by the heritage and the future of their city is such a massive thing, and why we're such keen supporters of MotoFest. And we're really pleased to see the work that E.ON have been doing alongside us in terms of making Coventry more child-friendly, the work they've done with Sydney Stringer and other schools around the city in terms of designing the competition for wraps for the electric vehicle. And it's all about inspiring actually the next generation in the city, young people, about actually what their futures look like, what the future is for them in this city, to feel the city is for them, and that they've got opportunities in the city and they don't have to go elsewhere necessarily in the future to find them, but there's opportunities here for employment, for leisure as they grow up. So we're really excited about that. We've done a lot of consultation over the last year with our children and young people about what's important to them, because we really want actually the decisions we make as a local authority to be driven by the children and young people who are our future here. And one of the big things that comes through again and again in every consultation we do is around actually how are we going to be environmentally sustainable as a city, how are we going to look after the planet, the climate. And so it's a thing that is so important to our children and young people, so it really is great to be a part of this. And finally, I just think actually it's so important that we hear the voices of our children and young people. As a council, we try and be bold and innovative in doing that. You might have seen over the last 3 weeks on Channel 4 the kids documentary airing, which was the voices of some of our children who have been in the care system, sharing their experiences of that. You know, we were warned as a local authority against doing that. Okay, well, why would you want to do that? It could make Coventry look bad, but actually the decision was made that actually it's more important that people hear the reality of our kids' lives, and actually that can influence and change things for the better. And I love being part of an authority that takes risks in all sorts of ways, whether it's motorsport, being part of the TV documentary, that takes risks because it wants the best for its children, its young people and all its residents. So yeah, delighted to be a part of this and really looking forward to the weekend.
Fantastic. So there should be some really good opportunities to discuss how we bring the people of the future together with the technologies of the future. So thank you, everyone. Murray, maybe you'd like to kick us off with an introduction.
Thank you very much. So my name is Murray Paul. I'm from Cllr. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for our organisation, which essentially means I'm responsible for engaging with governments over the types of things, regulations, policies that a business of our size will want to see set up in a way that we can be successful and contribute to society. This particular debate really heralds back to actually my last job, where I led the team across Cllr 2.5 years ago that set our decarbonisation goals across the business. And when I reported out to the board on that, I set them with some sort of facts and figures, which really brings it home just how important it is that a business like ours shows a leadership responsibility in that. So I'm sure most of you know that transport emissions are by far the biggest emissions on the sort of global pie chart of carbon emissions. Passenger car transport is the biggest sector within that, and although we are the largest UK automotive manufacturer, we're a relatively small player on the global scene, but even as a small player, as a business, when we tot up all of our emissions through all of our supply chain, all of our own operations and all of our cars that are on the road, we are the size of a well-developed country like New Zealand. That is what we're responsible for, and that is not a light responsibility to carry. So we are in a world where we are being regulated to do it, rightly so, but we are ahead of that regulation. We are going to hit our net zero targets ahead of that, and we want to learn from others as we go around, and we want to share our learning about what we do, because it's a shared endeavour as we're going forward. So that's what I'm hoping to contribute President towards.
Thank you, Murray. And personally, I've just taken delivery of my own
You
Jaguar
have?
I-Pace, which I have to say is a fantastic car, and maybe it sort of competes with this in terms of the two-wheel variety. Perhaps this is a little bit of a more of a niche, but great to see the progress that's been made at Cllr.
I'll give you the
Thank
tenner
you.
later. Thank you.
Thank you. Margot.
Thank you very much, Chris. My name is Margot James. I'm Executive Chair of the Warwick Manufacturing Group at the University of Warwick, and I've been in that role for just over 3 years. Prior to that, I was a Member of Parliament, and during my time, 10 years almost in Parliament, I was a business minister and also Minister for Digital. And just the issue of regulation has cropped up quite a bit today. For those of you who were here for the excellent presentation from the drone company, when we were being told that it was fantastic, and as it indeed it is, that we're doing these medical deliveries by drone, you know, whether it's blood or organs that are needed very, very urgently, and can obviously be delivered far quicker by drone technology, and that's only just started in the UK. It's been going on for several years, at least 4 years in parts of Africa. It's going on substantially across the United States, and I think that we are, as a country, despite the fantastic innovation of that company, falling behind because of the lack of regulation, or rather the over-regulation by the Civil Aviation Authority that isn't keeping pace with technological advance. So we've got an area where the regulation isn't keeping up and it's over-regulated. And then we also heard on the panel earlier today from my colleague David Evans at WMG, who's an expert in micro-mobility, the e-cargo bikes, the e-scooters and that sort of thing, personal mobility. And that is an area where the Minister, who's a very good guy, MP for Hereford, Jesse Norman, is tearing his hair out because he can't get parliamentary time to pass the necessary regulations to enable this fantastic advance in personal mobility, which will be tremendously carbon reducing, to be regulated. So we've got to catch up, I think, as a country and get more sophisticated. When I was a business minister, we were very fond of saying that, you know, regulation, it's light touch in the UK, the sandbox approach, it's all great. But actually, on coming out of Parliament, I'm starting to see that all is not so rosy as I believe when I was in government. So I think that's just one area which really needs looking at if we're to capitalise on the tremendous advantages that all this innovation that we're here to discuss today is to actually bring out all the advantages that and achieve its potential.
Thank you, Margot. And I have got a question lined up on regulation actually in a moment, so that's given us a good run into it. Thank you. Neil.
Thank you. So good afternoon everyone. Neil Smith, I'm Head of Energy and Utilities Sector for Vodafone Business in the UK. Vodafone, you probably know the brand. In the UK we have approaching 20 million customers, globally about 350 million. And as a consequence of that, we contribute to carbon as well. We're a big infrastructure operator and we take that responsibility very seriously. So what are we doing about that, and how are we helping wider society? So the first thing is around digital inclusion. So that reach and scale gives us the ability to digitally connect consumers who otherwise may not be connected. We saw that through the COVID pandemic, for example. We are increasing the coverage of our networks so that we can connect rural communities, and that will be important not only as consumers but for digital economy as more things become connected. And And we are also committed to net zero and sustainability. So in terms of our own goals, in the UK by 2027, our internal operations will be net zero. In Germany, it's by 2025, for example. And some of the things we're doing there, just picking up on some of the earlier points, already all of our UK operations run on renewable energy sources. We have invested recently in PPA, so we're building out solar farms, so we'll be grid independent as we go through the future as well. And then we'll be taking the excess of that self-generation and putting that back into the grid and into local communities. I think the final piece, and what I do, I mean, historically I've worked with financial services organisations, and several years ago I pivoted to work with the energy and utility industries, because whilst the global financial system of course is very important, I wanted to be able to look at my children in their eyes and say what I do matters. And so I now work with the likes of E.ON and with other energy organisations to drive sustainability, to drive the net zero and the transition to a mixed clean energy future. And just on that, just picking up from earlier, I think the theme that came across me earlier that is around connectivity. All of these innovations require data to be taken out and to go somewhere and to be analysed and actioned. And in fact, we released some research yesterday, and what we found is that by 2030, 3.3 billion things will connect and transact directly with each other. So there's a huge amount of work that we're doing around how do those things connect securely and how do those things connect sustainably as well.
Thank you. I feel like you need no further introduction, but anything else you'd like to add, Jim?
No, I think in the interest of time,
right.
let's move on.
Right, okay, thank you. So I think there was a real theme coming out on this side of the bike, so to speak, around digitisation and connectivity as well, and to add with some of the macro themes that we heard from the other side of the table. So I've got 4 questions that I'm going to pose to my colleagues on the round table. As I alluded to, the first one does actually kick off in relation to policy and infrastructure, and I'm going to put this one the way of Jim, Murray and Neil in the first instance, see if there's any particularly strong views on it. But so the question is, what regulatory and policy changes are needed at both central and local government to support the electrification of cities and the automotive transport sector with its transition? Anyone like to offer a view first of all? Jim?
Well, I'll just mention CVLR because I want you all to go and have a look at that today or tomorrow, because you'll like it. But more than that, here's the point. I was down in Parliament a couple of weeks ago giving evidence to the Transport Select Committee as to why I thought it was important that they should further investigate this innovation, because we think it will save the country hundreds of millions of pounds going forward in public transport investment. We've been working on this for the best part of 6 or 7 years now, and just to say the point or to carry on the point that Margot made, regulation is massively holding us back. We have to go through a whole process called the Transport Works Act, which can take years. It's like a public inquiry to have this vehicle on the road that is on fixed rails. It weighs 8 tonnes fully laden. It's about the size of a big minibus, and it's got all the technology you'd have in any other road car or rail vehicle, and we have to spend years in order to prove that it actually works. If I leave this building today and go down to the HGV office, because we all know where that is, wherever it is, and I can pick up a HGV licence, I can jump in a 40-50 tonne Arctic and I can go rolling round your local residential streets wherever I like without any hint of any issue or problems. That to me is completely ridiculous. When you consider, and I'm not against HS2 because I can see the great benefits there, But the amount of public money that is being spent on that, and there seems to be no ceiling to how much public money can be put into that to make it happen, and we've managed to do what we've done for less than 15 million quid, and that's why it's taken us so long to get where we are, and we still need to go further. I just think that is completely bonkers. Or, for example, the extension to Midland Metro in Birmingham, which again is a great system, but it's heavily expensive. We reckon it's running now at over £100 million a kilometre for that to happen, and we're throwing money at that. If we invested and changed a small bit of regulation, we could have VLR on our roads. We should have had it on the roads 2 years ago, quite frankly. We could have it on the roads now, and that then could be then also put in Birmingham, which would save them hundreds of millions of pounds. And my final point is, if you don't believe me, there's an ex-minister who was in the coalition government, who was a transport minister, Liberal Democrat, Norman Baker. He came actually just in the room next door to see me and some officer colleagues a few weeks ago. And basically he was supportive of what we were doing, but he was fuming about Edinburgh, and Margot mentioned it, and he basically said, and shut your ears now, Chris, as a utility company, he said the utility companies had us over a barrel because they made us put new utilities, all the utility companies, the water, the gas, the electric, all of them, made us put brand new facilities in the ground. That then meant it was ran to 100, it was just so expensive. In the end, they only did a third of what they were supposed to do because of the costs. And here we are, regulation and money, and we can have a fantastic system for a tenth of the price. So if we do anything else, let's get on with that regulation and cut that regulation out, because otherwise, as a country, we would just stall where we are now.
I suspect it's a common theme that we're all going to sort of reinforce, that that regulation we feel restricts us rather than enables us to achieve some of the things that we can see are possible and are desperately needed.
Solar farms was mentioned. Luckily, our solar farm, we will be able to plug into the national grid. But we keep hearing recently, you build solar farms now, you can't plug them into the national grid. I mean, how crazy is this?
So, Maury, what about at the OEM, the automotive manufacturing volume end of it? What do you need to see from a regulation point of view?
I think I'll go from a policy point first, which was in your question. And for those sort of looking at industry, you won't have failed to notice a fairly topical, raging debate between two different sets of ideologies over whether we should or shouldn't have an industrial strategy in this country. And it really rests between the two ideas of free marketeers saying, we'll just let the economy sort it out and the cream will rise to the top by itself. It doesn't need any state intervention whatsoever. And then you've got the other side that, we need to back the horses, that we need to select the winners that we want to do. What are we good at as a country, and let's align everything behind it. And I can see pros and cons in both of those. But there are two huge interventions that have happened in the last year that completely changes the game in this. The first was Biden in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, trillions of dollars put behind it. And the second was the EU, their counter-proposal to the Green Deal Industrial Plan. Again, trillions, billions of euros put behind it. And that essentially means that you can't afford not to have an industrial strategy. And that's what we need to do, whether we call it an industrial strategy. And what that means and why that's pertinent to this thing is clean mobility and clean energy are absolutely at the heart of what an industrial strategy has to deliver within there. And it's around aligning everything through the skills that we teach our young people to go into those areas where we said we want to be excellent as a country. Through the current workforce, for our industry, this is the biggest technological revolution since the cart gave way to the car. So that we cannot leave behind our current workforce who need to reskill in this journey. We can't afford just to focus on the next generation in there. It means quicker regulation development. We are too slow and too cumbersome. There's a really critical one for our industry called the ZEV mandate. We started a year after Europe started their next generation of regulation. They finished theirs at the beginning of this year. we still haven't got there yet. You know, we're just not good enough at being quick and making decisions. So it's all sorts of things like that. It's about really aligning what we want to be great at in this country and really putting our efforts behind every single piece of government through energy provision, through grid connections, and really prioritising those things. And then if I can just sort of finish off, because it's been mentioned a couple of times, I'll talk about gigafactories in there. So it's, from a purely JLR point of view, that there is no JLR announcement because it's not a JLR investment. And it's not me just being very political with my words. It's our shareholder who's making an investment, and they have another motor company in India and they want to make one investment and feed both their motoring organisations, which is why not a JLR investment. Jim is right on the sort of language that people have been using today about the batteries must be close to the factories to build them, but there is a really important nuance in there. There's different stages of battery production, and the Tata Gigafactory will make cells. And really, cells are quite easy to transport. They're low voltage, you know, they're not welded together into 800 volts and things like that. It's the packs that you want to put in the cars that you have to have next to the factory. And irrespective of where our shareholders will build the cells, we will pack them into batteries in the UK next to our site, and our footprint is absolutely secure, and we are committed to this region and the investment we want to make in the region. So I think that's a really important distinction. And then the final bit on gigafactories, and this comes back to the industrial strategy, and this is where I think the opportunity. If we think we're done with gigafactories, we've lost the prize. Gigafactories are only the tip of the spear, and I'd encourage you to think about gigawatt hours of capacity rather than factories, because the one our investors are going to make will probably not cross 4 of the 7 off. You know, it's that huge, but it's going to be one site in there. The value chain and the value creation in the batteries comes well before cells are starting to become off the rollers in there. It's about where are we getting our raw materials from, sustainably, responsibly sourced. A lot of that could be in the UK. Where are we going to refine those raw materials to make the biggest value creation in them? We should be doing that in the UK. Where are we making the cathodes you spoke about earlier? Where are we making the anodes in there? This is all stuff that happens before it hits to the gigafactory in there, and that's the prize for this clean revolution that we need to be going. We want to really industrialise the whole end-to-end supply chain and not just look at this gigafactory as this sort of golden nirvana in the end. Yes, it's an important first step, and yes, I hope it's the seed investment that brings all the other investment into the UK. But it goes back to that industrial strategy, really aligning everything behind it and stacking it up.
Thanks, Murray. Some really clear points on the supply chain as a whole there. Neil, final word on this one, and then I'm going to move us on. Anything from a Vodafone or digitisation point of view?
Yeah, from a policy point of view,
Yeah.
I don't think we have any particular, well, we have lots of constraints, but in terms of the topics that we're discussing, I think one of the things I would say, the constraint that we face is around infrastructure. So in order to enable all the things that we're talking about, we need a digital infrastructure. And actually the constraint we therefore have is power, is the physical power that we can get into our network. And then the second part of this is taking it into areas which are not already well served. So what we call not spots, so areas of poor coverage or low coverage, rural communities. So we work very closely with government around what we call the shared rural network. So we have a commitment by 2025, along with our fellow operators, to cover 99.5% of UK population. And actually, because of the constraints, or some of the constraints I've talked about, we're having to do that with grid and self-powered networks. So what we're now using, again, as I mentioned earlier, is solar, wind and batteries to actually take our network out and use mobile satellite connectivity rather than traditional fibre. And it's really to, on one hand, it's to get around that constraint, but the second hand, it delivers a sustainable outcome as well.
Great, sounds really impressive. Thank you, Neil. So move us on a little bit from the technology itself then to the people. This question I'm going to direct Margot and Matt's way. So really looks at education, skills and apprenticeships. So the demand for the right skills and green engineering jobs is dramatically increasing. How can schools, universities and employers work together to best incentivise the next generation to ensure they get the right education, the right training opportunities, the right motivation, and I guess not just those at the top of our education system, but some of the more disadvantaged pupils as well. How best to tackle that? First go at it?
No, I'll kick off. I guess for me there's probably three key things when I think about this. It's around inspiration, accessibility and relationships. In terms of inspiration, actually, do our children and young people see the future in these sort of industries? Do they see how this could be something that excites them, that inspires them, something that actually is for them? And so, or do they just see it as things for sort of an elite group of people that are sort of at the top schools with the top degrees? So I think actually things like MotoFest, things about like getting into communities, showing actually what these industries look like. Actually, there's excitement in these industries. Actually, meeting people from the industries, realising that these industries have apprentices in them, seeing what those roles look like. I think that inspiration is massive. And that ties into the accessibility, people realising that these things are for them. Actually, that we take away some of the barriers, that we have apprenticeship routes in, not just university routes in, that we think about the fact that actually we're recruiting people at 16, 17, they're probably not going to be necessarily work ready. We've got generations that lost education due to COVID, actually they need to learn how to be in the world of work. And some of the challenges we have around apprenticeships are just simple things about actually helping them to have the right work ethic, thinking about when you need to be in an office, when you need to be turning up, actually working through some of those things. And that's where to me like relationships become important, actually having the right mentors, having the right people going into schools, having the right people working alongside your apprentices. You know, I think all of us can think back to when we were young people, and there's someone that inspired us, wasn't there? Whether it was a teacher, a youth worker, a sports teacher, that actually helped us get to where we are today. And I think actually for a lot of our young people, especially those from more disadvantaged groups, it's where are those people? And so actually if you're getting involved in schools, if you're offering apprenticeships, thinking about who are the right people within your teams to take on some of that mentoring role, to inspire, to get alongside young people, sort of give them that future, give them that hope. I think that's really important as well.
Thank you. And I think the observation that COVID has given us some opportunities, but also we mustn't lose sight of the fact that to bring the next generation through, it does require working in a collaborative way, not just on MS Teams. I think we've all got a role to play in that. So thank you. Margot, anything you'd like to add to this?
Yes, I think it's a very vital area. If we just look at the automotive sector that we've been talking a lot about today, or the transport sector more widely, on batterification and electrification, if we get in this country, as Murray elucidated, the whole battery supply chain into our UK manufacturing sector, then the Faraday Institute, which is the government-backed authority on what Britain needs to do in terms of electrifying transport, has estimated that by 2040 there will be 275,000 jobs connected with the auto batterification sector. Currently there's about 150,000, so that's a huge advance, and those jobs are going to be different. And Faraday and ourselves at WMG and the UK Automotive Council have developed an electrification skills framework which have looked to the future, the kind of jobs that are going to be needed at all points in the supply chain, and what skills are going to be needed, for how many jobs, and what qualifications, literally down to the detail of the types of jobs into the future. And that is quite challenging in an area of technology transformation. Obviously there's going to be some things when we look back in 10 years' time that we got wrong, but on the whole we're looking ahead and in an informed way. And there are many different skills, levels of occupation, from thousands of technicians that are going to be needed to the R&D, really incredibly demanding chemistry jobs. So what needs to change? I think we need to put far more behind apprenticeships. It's disappointing to see that the numbers of apprenticeship starts have actually reduced in the last couple of years. We have degree apprenticeships, which will enable people to go into level sort of 6, 7 plus jobs at the end of it, and WMG we are educating about 1,000 degree apprentices at the moment, and that's probably more than any other Russell Group university. And things have to change with the funding mechanism, I think, for this to really take off. Because a lot of universities are a little bit shy of getting too involved with degree apprenticeships because the funding isn't quite complete. It relies a lot on industry to make up the funding, and not every company can afford to. JLR, I'm pleased to say, you do cover a lot. You invest a lot in your apprenticeships, and we're running degree apprenticeships for JLR because they're willing to support, but not every company is. So that's one thing. At the lower level of technician jobs that are required, we're talking here about jobs sort of level 2 to 4, which the most of the education post-school takes place in FE colleges. And FE colleges, I don't know whether anybody here is connected to an FE, but their funding is really tight. They cannot afford to look to the future and think, well, we want to educate a generation of engineers for jobs that are going to come in a few years' time. They've got to have a job to go to at the end of the course, literally, otherwise they won't get the funding. So what we're doing at WMG is working with colleges West Midlands that represent all the FE colleges, or most of them across the West Midlands. We're taking this electrification skills framework. We're working out with the colleges what they want, what they need to teach to the levels that they're teaching at. And we're working with them. In some cases, we'll be helping them to train their staff. And we see our role at WMG as an enabler of regional growth, as well as, having to deliver on our immediate financial requirements. Not every university is in a position to do that. We are, and we take our role seriously. But there's some changes that need to be made, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on the apprenticeships point. Both degree apprentices and apprenticeships generally are just a fantastic way to provide the skills we need for the future and to bring the whole of society along with us. So, really powerful. Thank you, Margot. Okay, last couple of questions. I'm just going to come to Mark on this next one, if that's okay, which is around innovation and startups, Mark. So what are the obstacles faced by innovators like yourself, entrepreneurs, startups, and how do you manage to overcome them?
I don't know where to start with that question. There's a lot of obstacles along the way, and it's certainly not easy. I think fundamentally it breaks down into three things for me. Supply chain is obviously, like anyone that's trying to manufacture anything at the moment knows that the supply chain is a difficult thing, especially in the EV world. And when you are a small business trying to live in a world with much larger players like Jaguar Land Rover or Peugeot or someone like that, you are at the bottom of the food chain. You want them, you only want a very small amount of them. You want 10 of them, they want 10 million of them. Who is going to get the attention of the person that's supplying them? So you have that issue. Because you're only buying 10 of them, you have to pay 10 times as much for them as well, and you probably can't afford to do so. So supply chain is key. Being able to get the parts you want, when you want, at the right price in today's world, very, very difficult. We all know the prices of pretty much everything are going up, right? Engineering challenge, I would say, is another one. So, for instance, let's say I want to create some cell carriers for my next vehicle, and I want to use Samsung cells. Now, Samsung cells have a particular tolerance on them, which means that if I want to create something to hold them, it's going to cost a lot of money because the machining has to be very, very tight to be able to hold that cell perfectly. Now, if I want to swap to a cell, let's say I want to use the LG cell on my next product, that means I have to throw that part away because the tolerance on the LG cell is slightly different. So, whereas a larger manufacturer is able to spend a lot of money on a tool for something that they can roll out across hundreds of thousands of vehicles, a small niche manufacturer, a low to medium volume, has to think of flexible solutions that allows them to swap and change and prototype and test on all of those things without spending a significant amount of money every time you want to do so, because you simply, wouldn't survive. And the last one I would say is funding. I mean, I don't want to sort of bash the government too much. They've helped us out an awful lot, and I think they do a really great job of funding innovation and early stage businesses. I think where the hole is that these innovation grants and support and funding tend to be focused on two areas. You get kind of like proof of concept, so I've got an early idea and I want to see if it works. And then you get production readiness. So, I've taken that through to the next step, and now there's the potential of me sort of almost completing this thing and being ready to go into production and sell it. Fantastic. There's lots of support to get you to that point. It's the next step, I believe, that we are missing, which is, okay, I've got this thing, it's ready for production. Now I need a significant amount of money for tools, and just so that I can buy all of the parts, in high volume to be able to build this thing, I need to be able to market it so that people know it exists and that they can buy it. And I think, that is an area at the moment where we need to have a rethink, and we could do more to support businesses in that stage, because sometimes it seems to me that we would rather go back to the beginning and give someone else some money for another new great idea, rather than complete the job that we've already given a lot of money for in the first place to get it to. So I think for me, challenges-wise, those are the three areas that we need to think about.
Yeah, it's really interesting that supply chain and funding are as big an issue in the sort of niche sector as they are in the mass volume sector. And I think what you were drawing out at the end though perhaps is the cash flow challenges that you might have in the niche sector of scaling something up and investing in a concept that you know is proven and works.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really, really, really interesting. Thank you.
Can I add to that just quickly?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
in the case of Veloce, we've gone from 5 to 50 people in a few years. When the government funding was useful was when it was very clear as to what it was actually being provided for. So during COVID, we got future fund funding, which was they would match fund what we went and raised on the private market, which was great. But this is exactly the problem which you were just explaining now, is that when you grow to a certain scale, it's not just a case of the funding necessarily isn't there, but it's a very fragmented market as to what certain fundings are for. It's very unclear as to what the UK government is actually providing funding for. So when you're looking at where to go to get the funding, it's like you don't really know where to start. I think that the UK government could do a lot better job at clarifying and clearing up exactly where they're actually providing funding and how. I don't know whether you find that, but it's a bit of a mad maze of different avenues to walk down.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I'm going to come back to you actually, if that's all right, but I'm going to move us on to a slightly different topic now to start to close us off, which is, I guess, why we're all here, which is around motorsport and entertainment, really. So, what are the opportunities for motorsport and entertainment? How do they need to adapt, and why are they so important for some of our bigger objectives, like tackling climate change and regenerating our cities?
Well, I think the really great thing about what we do in racing and motorsport is we get to try and magnify the elements that we were talking about really important earlier. You were saying that it needs to look exciting for people to get into these industries well. If you look at young engineers coming through now, before the likes of Extreme E and Formula E, every young engineer would want to get into Formula 1 or would want to get into the combustion engine. But actually now with these really exciting electric racing series, we're providing entertainment and you're getting, that's attracting a bigger talent pool to more green technologies. But also, there's two more fundamental things that motorsport can do, and what we're doing in Extreme E is we're actually also engaging the consumer. It's all good if we go produce all this more sustainable technology, but we need people to want it, because ultimately demand is going to be key to us actually being able to sell more sustainable technology. So people seeing what battery technology can do, what electric vehicles can do, obviously means that you're going to lead to more people wanting to buy them, which ultimately means we can replace a lot of the internal combustion engine vehicles on the road. I think as well, the beauty of sport and entertainment is 26 of the 27 most watched programs of all time have been sport-based. So if you're going to send a message out and you want to educate a mass audience, in the case of climate change, the biggest issue of our time, using an entertaining format to actually bring awareness in a more inclusive manner as to what we need to do from a climate change perspective, the technologies that are available, various different, I think actually bringing awareness to that, to the mass consumer through not just pure education but also an entertaining format means that you're distributing the message to a bigger audience in a different way, which I think, I used the example of where we raced in Scotland. My sister, who's in the room, didn't know how hydroelectric power worked from watching the Extreme E broadcast and recognising that this abandoned mine was being used to generate hydroelectric power. She came away going, bloody hell, I understand how we actually do that. So that's a fundamental responsibility that the entertainment element of racing has. And also I think it provides, anyone who really is serious about climate change recognises that we need to involve the big corporates, the big organisations in the world in the discussion and not separate that and say, it's half your fault that we're in this mess because you relied on your supply chains all carbon based in the past. Well, I'm afraid we need the corporates to want to change for us to actually change the world. Platforms like Extreme E and what we do allow companies like E.ON to come into a series, talk about the good initiatives that they're doing, project that to a new customer base, and whether that's E.ON, whether it's petroleum companies, we need them all to engage in the conversation. So providing inclusive and relevant platforms like Extreme E, like Formary, like the MotorFest this weekend, for brands to come and talk about the good things that they're doing and not always get bashed for the bad things that we've done in the past. I think it's really important to actually inspire everyone to work together to change, and we can't ignore the big corporates. We need them on side. So I think that's one of the responsibilities that we have.
Thank you. And a really powerful statistic that 26 of the top 27 programmes are sports entertainment based. I'm almost as intrigued as to what the 27th was actually.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking
Coronation Street or something. But we'll go into that later, but maybe one for another day. Right, final word. I'm going to come back to yourself, James, for the final word. I guess given you're sort of in charge of bringing entertainment and sport together for us over the weekend that we're all looking forward to. Any final reflections you'd like to add?
Absolutely. I think just on that final question, the opportunity, I think, to take what a series like Extreme E is doing, bring that into an urban context, root it into the everyday lives of people, enabling the next generation to experience, not just through eSport, which is a growing area. We hope that there will be an E version of this as well, that we can race on virtually, but that they can experience it viscerally. It gets into the soul, because at the end of the day, transport isn't just about an A to B solution. It engages people's emotions in a journey, and to do that through sport engages the next generation in the opportunities that are going to be created through this. So I think we're looking forward to creating this and making motorsport, electric motorsport, accessible to people who live in cities, and we hope that this will be a prototype for street circuits across the world. So this weekend we are a long way from this vision at the moment in terms of what's going on, but we are engaging people in the excitement of the heritage of the motor industry and looking to the future. And we hope that we will start that journey of inspiring the next generation.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
I believe we've got some live demonstrations of various technologies outside for people to see.
We have. So we have drones flying around this afternoon, we have autonomous vehicles being demonstrated, we've got a lot of the rest of the festival being built. As all of that goes on as well, you'll see music stages being brought in and all sorts of other things. We've got many manufacturers with us over the weekend. But this afternoon, do go down and see the new Coventry Very Light Rail carriage, which is rightly proud of leading the innovation on this. As well as autonomous technology with Coventry University and some of our drone partners as well, and micromobility through silent e-scooters, etc. All we go down and see.
Absolutely, looking forward to joining you on that. So, before I wrap us up, Councillor O'Boyle, anything you would like to add as a closing remark? Or?
Well, I suppose just to say, I don't need to say anything, it's already been said. two things that spring to mind. I would love to know who the 26 sports are actually, because I'm sure the snooker would have been up there somewhere. No one ever mentions that, you know. Steve Davis v Dennis Taylor. There was 18 million watching that. Are you talking British or are you just talking around the world?
Around the world.
It'd be American rubbish then. No one's interested in that. That's the truth. Look, as I said earlier, Coventry's got a great history of manufacturing, of automotive technology and manufacturing, and I want to bring some of that back. And my point I was trying to make earlier, that you know, I worked in the industry and it gave me opportunities, you know, wanting to extol the virtues of that industry so I can give, you know, kids coming through those opportunities that I had, I think for me is the least I can do. It's the right thing to do, because they were good jobs, they were well paid jobs, they were secure jobs. And when I talk to kids who have been through university, I was fortunate enough not to go through university, so who go to university and end up working in coffee shops, end up working in McDonald's. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, the service sector is great for our economy, but our economy can't just be about that. It's got to be about making things. It's got to be about selling things that people want to buy, so we actually mean something as a country to the rest of the world. And I think Coventry can really demonstrate that. And that's what drives me, that's what I want to do. And I think everyone in this room would say exactly the same thing. So I just want to thank James for putting this on. I want to thank Chris for chairing today. He's done an excellent job, and I can tell if I say really nice things about E.ON, as I said right at the end, I am sure my next bill will be far more satisfactory.
No question about that, no question about that. So, right, thank you very much for those closing remarks. I think hopefully we've conveyed to everyone here that if we want to do something as significant as decarbonise our cities and our transportation, it's going to require a lot of collaboration across many, many sectors. It actually fills me with a huge amount of hope listening to the people on the round table today and the level of commitment that they have to do something about decarbonising our cities and our industries, that we will make progress, we will achieve this, and what better place to do it than in Coventry. So let's absolutely be a leading light for it, and thank you everyone for joining me in a fantastic conversation.